would now like to introduce our next researcher. His name is Dr. Ali Lakhani, and he is an uh, interdisciplinary researcher and senior lecturer with Trobe University. And I'll now hand over to Ali, who will present some of the work that he's done.
Thank you, Antonio. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm just going to share some work that I was fortunate to be a part of. So if there's any issues with the slides or audio, just type in the chat and we'll get it sorted out. Health service use, access to places in the community, and quality of life. A description of a co-designed research project as a presentation. Before I begin, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodianships of the land on which we meet. I'd like to pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country, recognizing their valuable contribution to Australia and the global society. So just to start, I guess, at the end, some of the take-home messages that I'd hope would come across in the next few slides that I'd present are, one, working on research projects and informing research projects does not require a degree nor specialist knowledge outside of your own lived experience. So all of us are valuable in our perspectives, and it's worthwhile for us to participate and engage with research. It is important that research has impact, and as a result, research should be responsive to the needs of the group that it intends to serve. Research should be participatory and inclusive, and impacted groups should be integrally involved throughout all phases of the research process. And a single conversation can inform a program of research. And it's really this last point that I believe, I guess, will come across in the next few slides I present, that a single conversation can inform a whole program of research. So a little bit about me. I'm a senior lecturer at public health with Trobe University. I'm an adjunct research fellow with Menzies Health Institute Queensland at Griffith University, and I was employed as a research fellow with Griffith University for over 5 years, and my role was funded by the Motor Accident Insurance Commission during this time. I coordinate the Master of Public Health and Master of Public Health and Health Administration at La Trobe, coordinate a subject called Systems Thinking and Leadership, and I've taught in research methods in diverse universities. So my research focuses on characteristics of high quality health services and factors contributing to health service access and engagement for people with disability and aging adults. Now in 2018, I received some funding, and I received funding to complete a project which partnered with a health and social service organization that provided services and advocacy specifically for people with spinal cord injury. And I had a discussion with the manager there and my interest around green space. So access to parks and green space for people with spinal cord injury. And we developed a small proposal for a grant where we would look at how accessible is green space to the members and clients with spinal cord injury. So I was really interested in this topic. I still do a lot of work around the natural environment. And I thought, let's apply for this grant. Let's collaborate and apply for the grant. And we applied for the grant and we were successful. So we received funding to do this study where we look at accessibility of green space for people with spinal cord injury. After I had a chat with peer support workers, so my contact at the organization said, oh, you actually got the funding. Well, maybe you should speak to some people with lived experience, which, would seem pretty intuitive to have done in the first instance, but that's not what we did. Having said that, I was linked up with some peer support workers. So I had a conversation with peer support workers, and their response was, Ali, who cares about green space? Our members and clients value green space, but this is not important to our members and clients right now. We care about health services. More importantly, we care about the physical accessibility of health services. So in short, and they said it pretty overtly, that Ali, green space is great, but that's not important to us. We're really facing inaccessible health services for our members and clients. We're constantly fielding support inquiries for access to health services. So that's what you should focus on instead. they basically made another point. They said, look, how valuable is a health service if I cannot get in it? So to the point I was looking at previously, they said, I don't care if something is next door to me if I'm not able to go inside. And that was a point that really struck home. And some of you would have seen this image before, and one of the peer support workers shared this image with me. And it's basically a window at a business of some sort, and it says wheelchair ramp available, please ask at the counter. And many of you would get the scenario that someone would be in. And it's just a good way to exemplify that physical accessibility is very important. Ensuring that we have equitable access to services and places in the community is very important. And particularly a health services was the area of interest. So the conversation I had with peer support workers identified many questions that we could answer. One, how close are health services for members and clients? Two, what is the physical accessibility of services and diverse places in the community for members and clients? And three, how does accessing places in the community and health services impact quality of life? So that initial conversation with a few peer support workers led into various conversations where we decided to throw away the initial idea and really develop some research questions from the ground up that would inform their practice and the questions informed by members and clients, and develop some studies around them. So we developed a protocol for two studies. One was a spatial study. So we used geographic information systems to look at the distance to disability-specific services within Queensland regions. And the second study was a cross-sectional survey, so a study where we used a single survey. And in the survey, we asked members and clients to respond to various questions around health service physical accessibility, health service use, accessibility to places in the community, uses of places in the community, there's a spelling error, and factors that contribute to general practitioner identification and retention, and finally, quality of life, right? So first we had a spatial study, and the second, we had a study where a survey was used to investigate these domains. So the spatial study resulted in a publication where some peer support workers are listed as co-authors, and essentially we found that there are key regions in Queensland where that have significantly longer travel times to health services or disability-specific services, and areas with a fair amount or an intermediate amount of people with disability that do not have access to particular services. So it showed in gaps in service provision is what we were able to identify. And that was what we did with one study that came across, or we developed just through conversation. The second, in terms of our survey, we worked collaboratively to develop a survey, and we developed a process to ensure that we included measures that were relevant for members and clients. And in short, researchers from the university went away and scoped or identified types of measures that could be used. And these measures were shared with peer support workers with lived experience. And we refined these measures so that they were the most suitable for members and clients who would participate in the survey. In terms of our outcomes, we developed an understanding of the physical accessibility of health services. So here you'd see this table. The health services we considered were general practitioners, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, dentists, hospitals, specialists, and pharmacies. And we asked across these 6 domains, how would you consider it accessible, inaccessible, or is this a service you do not use? And what you'd see across all of the health service types, specialist equipment were the least accessible domain for people with spinal cord injury who participated in our study. So the highest number of people indicated that specialist equipment was the least accessible for these diverse health services. We also developed an understanding of factors that contribute to general practitioner identification and retention. And you'd see that many people identified their GP through their existing GP prior to injury or recommendation for a family or friend. People use their GP because they're knowledgeable about the specific condition, their facility is fully accessible, and because of trust. And people indicated that they would select a different GP if they were more knowledgeable about the condition of spinal cord injury. So we were able to develop an understanding of what are the factors that people consider when identifying a GP and retaining their GP. Finally, we were able to look at which areas in the community are not accessible. We found that restaurants and parks were amongst the least accessible places in the community for people with spinal cord injury who participated in our study. So what you'd see is that generally private establishments are the least accessible, and more of the public settings are more accessible, but there is still some nuances to that. And we looked at the factors that are associated with quality of life domains. So well-being or life and personal circumstances, psychological health, physical health. And what you'd find is that having increased barriers impacting engagement with the community and frequenting or was negatively associated with these health outcomes. So having higher number of barriers was associated with having poorer levels of psychological health, physical health, and frequenting a higher number of places in the community was associated with improved or higher levels of psychological health, physical health, and overall well-being. And this would be pretty obvious findings that you'd assume, but this is what we had found in this study. So what does this all mean? Structural barriers in health service environments may inhibit health service access for people with spinal cord injury. Specialist equipment is clearly a domain that requires the most modification. Engaging with a higher number of places in the community can improve quality of life outcomes. And trust and knowledge of condition are key considerations that people with spinal cord injury have in relation to GP identification and retention. What are some practice implications? So these findings have informed health service and access advocacy efforts of the partner organization. The importance of developing an understanding of structural barriers inhibiting engagement in the community has been emphasized, and developing a better understanding of places in the community most frequented by members and clients with spinal cord injury and how these impact quality of life outcomes has also been identified. And finally, it's important that GPs are made knowledgeable of distinct issues that may arise as a result of having a spinal cord injury, and thus advocacy efforts around improving GP knowledge of condition have been progressed. And once again, our take-home messages. So working on projects, you'd see that most of the investigators on this project I raised, they're not academic researchers. They were peer support workers who worked in health and social service organizations, and their lived experience and their understanding of the lived experience of others supported them throughout their work. It is important that research should be responsive to the needs of groups that it intends to serve. And we'd hope we had done that with the reference project. Research should be participatory. And you would have seen that, look, just through a single conversation, it informed a whole program of research. And I hope that this information has been helpful. Always happy to answer any questions. My email is in the bottom. And Antonio, I'm pleased with this opportunity and happy to chat.
Yeah, thank you, Ali, for a great presentation. I think just one question that I would have, and you mentioned your credentials as a senior researcher, when you had that conversation around, getting the funding and the, I guess, allocation for green space, and then having frank conversations with peer support workers as a researcher yourself, how did that, did that change your practice, or was it a bit of a shock for you?
Very good question. I think in some ways it did change my practice. So I had historically worked on participatory research, so it was a bit I believed initially we had some sort of a collaborative effort towards the study. I'd been working with management at the organization, and those management represent people with lived experience, albeit not on the ground working with them day to day. And when I had that conversation with peer support workers, it didn't shock me, and I didn't have any pushback on my end. I was actually grateful, and now when I work on projects, I actually start from the perspective of peer support workers or those with lived experience, and feed that up to management, opposed to the opposite.